The night Luca Romano first saw her, she was wearing scrubs stained with someone else's blood, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. He'd been assigned to shadow duty, babysit the boss's latest obsession, a trauma surgeon named Dr. Elena Moretti, who'd had the misfortune of saving the wrong man's life 3 weeks earlier. Luca stood in the hospital parking garage at 2:47 a.m., watching her emerge through the sliding doors of Brooklyn Methodist's emergency entrance. She moved like someone who'd forgotten how to be afraid, or maybe someone who was too exhausted to remember. Her dark hair had escaped its bun in wild tendrils, and even from 30 feet away, he could see the purple shadows beneath her eyes. She didn't notice him. Not yet. Luca had been doing this work for Vincent Castellano for 8 years, long enough to recognize when a protection detail would turn complicated. The Bratva had put a price on Elena Moretti's head the moment she'd resuscitated their rival's son on her operating table, and Vincent had decided, for reasons Luca didn't fully understand, that she was worth protecting. Orders were orders. Luca followed people. He watched. He intervened when necessary. He did not ask questions, and he certainly did not develop feelings. But then she stopped walking. Elena stood beside a silver Honda Civic, digging through her purse with increasing desperation. Luca watched her dump the contents onto the car's hood: wallet, lip balm, a granola bar, loose receipts, everything except keys. She pressed her forehead against the driver's side window and let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. That's when Luca made his first mistake. He stepped forward into the sodium yellow glow of the parking garage lights. "Lost something?" His voice echoed off concrete. She spun, and her hand went instinctively to her pocket, probably where she kept her phone, her lifeline. Her eyes were the color of espresso, and they were sizing him up with the clinical precision of someone used to assessing whether a body would survive the next 5 minutes. "Who are you?" "Someone who can help you get home safely." Luca held up both hands, palms out. He was wearing a black jacket over a gray Henley, jeans, boots, standard shadow work attire, nothing threatening. But he knew what he looked like. 6'3", broad-shouldered, the kind of face that had seen things and remembered them. "Your keys are on the roof of your car. You put them there when you were checking your phone." Elena's gaze flicked upward. She reached up, and sure enough, her keys were right where he'd said. Her fingers closed around them, but she didn't move to unlock the door. "You've been watching me." It wasn't a question. "Yes. Why?" "Because someone else is watching you too, and they don't have your best interests in mind." Luca took one step closer, just one. "Dr. Moretti, you saved the life of Marco Castellano 3 weeks ago. His father is grateful. The people who put 2 bullets in Marco, they're less grateful. They'd prefer that the surgeon who brought him back hadn't been quite so good at her job." The color drained from her face. She knew the name Castellano. Everyone in Brooklyn knew that name, even if they pretended not to. Vincent Castellano ran everything from the waterfront to the Diamond District, and what he didn't run, he owned. His word was law in 5 boroughs, and his son's near death had sent ripples through the entire underworld. "I'm a doctor," Elena said, and her voice had gone very quiet. "I don't choose who comes through my doors." "I took an oath." "I know. So tell whoever sent you that I appreciate the concern, but I don't need protection. I'll go to the police if..." "The police can't help you." Luca kept his voice gentle, but he let her hear the truth underneath. "The Bratva have people in the NYPD. They have people everywhere. By the time a patrol car responds to a call, you'll be gone. But Vincent Castellano has decided you're under his protection, which means you're under mine. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to drive home, and I'm going to follow you. I'll be outside your apartment tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'll be there again. And we'll keep doing this until the threat is neutralized." Elena stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This is insane. This is actually insane. I save one patient and suddenly I'm in a mob movie." "Welcome to Brooklyn," Luca said. She got in her car. She drove home. A 4th-floor walk-up in Park Slope. The kind of building with a front door that didn't lock properly and a landlord who'd stopped caring somewhere around 1987. Luca watched her climb the stairs, watched the light in her apartment window flick on, watched her shadow move past the curtains. Then he settled into his car across the street, and began the first of what would become 93 consecutive nights of surveillance. He didn't know it yet, but that was the night everything changed. 3 days into the assignment, Elena stopped pretending he wasn't there. She brought him coffee. Not expensive coffee, not a peace offering, just a paper cup from the bodega on the corner, black with 1 sugar. She handed it through his car window at 6:30 in the morning before her shift started and said, "If you're going to lurk outside my apartment, you should at least stay awake." Luca took the coffee. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm bribing you to leave." "It won't work." "I know," she said, and then softer, "but I had to try." He watched her walk away, white coat flapping in the October wind, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. A crack in the careful distance he maintained between himself and the job. He drank the coffee. It was terrible, burnt, too sweet, but he finished it anyway. By the end of the first week, Elena had established a routine, and Luca had memorized it. Hospital at 7, rounds until noon, surgery in the afternoon, charting until God knew when. She ate lunch at her desk, usually a wilted salad from the cafeteria. She checked her phone compulsively, always looking at the same photo. An older woman in a wheelchair, same dark eyes as Elena, same stubborn set to her jaw. Her mother, Luca guessed. When Elena thought no one was looking, her face would collapse into something raw and worried. Luca did what he always did. He researched. Within 48 hours, he knew everything. Rosa Morty, age 63, diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 6 years ago, now living in a long-term care facility in Queens. Monthly cost, $8,400. Elena's salary barely covered it, which explained the overtime, the exhaustion, the second job she worked on weekends at a clinic in Sunset Park. Elena Moretti was drowning in debt and responsibility, and she was doing it alone because her father had died when she was 17, and she had no siblings, no safety net, no one to catch her if she fell. He filed the information away. He told himself it didn't matter. She was an assignment, not a person. He would keep her alive, and then he would move on to the next job. But then came the hospital scene. It happened on a Thursday night, 11 days into his surveillance. Luca was parked in the hospital garage, waiting for Elena's shift to end, when he saw the white van. It rolled past too slowly, windows tinted black, no plates on the front bumper. Wrong. Everything about it was wrong. Luca was out of his car and moving before the van's side door slid open. 3 men, black tactical gear, guns drawn. They were heading for the emergency entrance, for Elena, and Luca had maybe 10 seconds before they breached the doors. He pulled his Glock from the holster at his back and fired twice into the van's rear tire. The sound echoed like thunder in the concrete space. The men spun toward him, and Luca used their momentary confusion to close the distance. He tackled the first man before he could raise his weapon, drove an elbow into his throat, and felt cartilage give way. The man went down choking. The second man got a shot off. It went wide, sparked off a concrete pillar 6 inches from Luca's head. Luca returned fire, center mass, double tap, and the man crumpled. The third man ran. He sprinted back toward the van, and Luca let him go because holding the perimeter was more important than pursuit. He kicked the weapons away from the 2 down men, checked pulses, 1 dead, 1 unconscious, and then turned toward the emergency entrance. Elena was standing in the doorway. She'd heard the shots. Her face was bone white, and her hands were pressed against the glass like she was trying to hold the world back through sheer force of will. Luca crossed to her in 3 strides. "Get inside. Now, lock the doors and call hospital security. Tell them there's been an incident in the garage, but it's contained. Do not call the police. Do you understand?" She nodded. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "Elena!" He said her name for the first time, and something in his voice made her eyes snap to his. "You're safe. I won't let them hurt you." She believed him. He could see it in her face, the way her breathing slowed, the way she straightened her spine and became, once again, the doctor who'd saved Marco Castellano's life against impossible odds. She went inside, she locked the doors, and Luca called Vincent. "We have a problem," Luca said when his boss picked up. Vincent Castellano didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. "Handle it. I need a cleanup crew at Brooklyn Methodist, level 2 parking, and I need to move the doctor. They know where she works." There was a pause, then, "Bring her to the estate. I'll make arrangements." The estate. Luca had been there exactly 4 times in 8 years, and each time had been for a matter of life and death. Vincent didn't invite people into his home. He summoned them, and the summons was usually the last thing they heard. But Elena Moretti was different. She'd become something more than a debt to be repaid. She'd become a symbol, and in Vincent's world, symbols mattered. "Understood," Luca said. He cleaned up the scene with Vincent's crew. They arrived in under 12 minutes, which was either impressive or terrifying depending on your perspective. The bodies disappeared. The van disappeared. By the time the hospital's security made their rounds, there was nothing left but a dark stain on the concrete and a new bullet hole in a pillar that would be patched and painted over by morning. Luca found Elena in the surgeon's lounge. She was sitting on a cracked leather couch, still in her scrubs, staring at nothing. He sat down beside her, careful to leave space between them. "We're leaving," he said. "Pack a bag. Enough for a week. I have patience. They'll find someone else to cover your shifts. My mother will be taken care of." Luca turned to face her fully. "Vincent Castellano is moving your mother to a private facility in Westchester. 24-hour nursing care, physical therapy, the best neurologists in the state. All expenses paid. She'll be safer there, and so will you." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She didn't let them fall. "Why? Why would he do that?" "Because you saved his son." Luca hesitated, then added, "And because you're under his protection now, that means something." "What does it mean?" "It means you belong to him until he says otherwise." The words came out harsher than he'd intended, but they were true. In Vincent's world, debts were paid in loyalty, and protection was a chain that bound tighter than marriage. Elena must have heard the weight of it because she closed her eyes and took a long, shuddering breath. "I don't have a choice, do I?" "No," Luca said. "You don't." They drove out to the estate in silence. It was a compound in Alpine, New Jersey, 20 acres of manicured grounds surrounded by a 12-foot stone wall and enough security to repel a small army. The main house was a sprawling modernist structure of glass and steel that looked like it had been airlifted from the Hollywood Hills. Luca had always thought it was too exposed, too vulnerable, but Vincent liked to see his enemies coming. Elena said nothing as they passed through the gates. She watched the house grow larger through the windshield, and Luca wondered what she was thinking. Was she terrified, resigned, angry? He couldn't read her anymore, and that bothered him more than it should have. Vincent was waiting in the foyer. He was a man in his early 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of face that photographs well and conceals everything. He wore a tailored suit even at midnight, and his hands were steady as he extended one toward Elena. "Dr. Morty, thank you for coming." Elena didn't take his hand. "I didn't have a choice." Vincent smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "No, but I would have invited you anyway. My son owes you his life, which means I owe you a debt. In my world, debts are taken seriously. I was doing my job, and now I'm doing mine." Vincent gestured toward the stairs. "Mrs. Chen will show you to your room. You'll be comfortable here. Anything you need only ask." Elena looked at Luca. He nodded once. "It's safe," and she followed the housekeeper up the curved staircase. Luca watched her until she disappeared around the corner, and then he turned back to Vincent. "The Bratva sent a kill team," Luca said. 3 men, professional setup, they knew her schedule. Someone on the inside is feeding them information. Find out who." "I will." Vincent crossed to the bar and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Luca. "How is she handling it?" "She's strong, smarter than most, but she's scared." "Good, fear keeps people alive." Vincent sipped his whiskey. "I'm moving her permanently into the estate. You'll stay on as head of her security detail. No one gets within 50 feet of her without my explicit authorization." "Understood." Luca understood. He also understood what was left unsaid. Vincent wasn't just protecting Elena because of a debt. He was protecting her because she'd become a piece on a much larger board, a move in a game Luca couldn't yet see. And Luca, whether he liked it or not, was now bound to her until Vincent decided otherwise. "Understood," Luca said. The first month was the hardest. Elena fought against the confinement, politely at first, then with increasing desperation. She demanded to return to work. She called her colleagues, her hospital administrator, her mother's care facility. Vincent allowed it all because denying her would have broken something essential in her, and broken people were useless. But he didn't relent on the security. Luca remained her shadow, present in every room she entered, every hallway she walked. They developed an uneasy rhythm. Mornings, Elena would sit in the estate's library, a two-story room lined with books Vincent had probably never read, and review medical journals on her tablet. Luca would sit by the door, close enough to intervene, far enough to give her the illusion of privacy. She never acknowledged him during these hours, but once, he caught her glancing at him in the reflection of a window. She looked away quickly, but not before he saw something in her expression that made his chest tighten. Curiosity, maybe something more. Afternoons, she walked the grounds. Vincent had brought in a physical therapist to teach her self-defense, and Luca watched her learn to throw a punch, to break a hold, to turn her body into something more than just a target. She was a quick study. Within 3 weeks, she could drop a man twice her size if she caught him off guard. Luca knew because he'd been her practice dummy more times than he cared to count, and she didn't pull her punches. "You're getting better," he told her one afternoon after she'd nearly dislocated his shoulder with a joint lock. "I'm getting angry," she corrected. "That works too." She looked at him then, really looked at him, the way she'd looked at patients in the trauma bay, trying to find the injury beneath the skin. "Why do you do this? Work for him?" It was the first personal question she'd asked. Luca considered deflecting, but something about the October sunlight slanting through the trees made him answer honestly. "Because I'm good at it. And because I owe him." "What kind of debt?" "The kind that doesn't get paid off." Elena sat down on the grass, cross-legged, her dark hair falling across her face. Luca remained standing, scanning the tree line out of habit. After a moment, she said, "My mother always told me to stay away from men like Vincent Castellano. She said they'd take everything from you and call it a gift." "Your mother was right. But you stay anyway." "I stay," Luca agreed. "Because the alternative is worse." He didn't elaborate. He didn't tell her that Vincent had found him 12 years ago in a gutter in Red Hook, beaten half to death by loan sharks who'd come collecting on his father's debts. He didn't tell her that Vincent had paid those debts, had given Luca a job and a purpose when he'd had nothing. He didn't tell her that loyalty, in Vincent's world, was the only currency that mattered, and Luca had bought his life with a promise he couldn't break. Elena seemed to understand anyway. She stood, brushed grass from her jeans, and said, "I'm going to visit my mother tomorrow. You can come if you want, but you're staying in the car." It wasn't a request. Luca nodded. "All right." They went to Westchester the next day. The facility was everything Vincent had promised. State-of-the-art, private, so clean it made Luca's eyes hurt. Elena's mother was in a suite on the 3rd floor, sitting in a wheelchair by a window that overlooked a garden. She lit up when she saw Elena, and for the first time since the parking garage, Elena smiled like she meant it. Luca stayed in the hallway. Through the open door, he could hear them talking, Rosa asking about the hospital, Elena deflecting with half-truths about a sabbatical, a research opportunity. He heard Rosa laugh, heard her tell Elena she was too thin, not sleeping enough, working too hard. All the things mothers said. And then he heard Rosa say something that made him go very still. "There's a man watching you. I can tell." "Is he good to you?" Elena's answer was soft, almost too quiet to hear. "I don't know yet." Luca stepped back from the doorway. His heart was doing something complicated in his chest, something that felt like a warning. He'd spent 8 years keeping distance between himself and the people he protected, and in 6 weeks, Elena Moretti had managed to breach every defense he'd built. It was dangerous. It was stupid. It was going to get someone killed. But he couldn't make himself stop. The secret room changed everything. Luca found it by accident on a Tuesday night in mid-November. He'd been sweeping the estate's lower level, a nightly routine, checking locks and camera feeds, when he noticed a discrepancy in the floor plan. The wine cellar was 12 feet shorter than the blueprint indicated. He ran his hands along the back wall, found the seam pressed. The wall swung inward on old hinges. Inside was an office. Not Vincent's main office with its mahogany desk and leather chairs, but a working space. Computers, filing cabinets, a corkboard covered in photographs, and red string connecting faces to places to dates. Luca recognized some of the faces. rival family heads, federal prosecutors, police captains. Others were new to him. And then, in the center of the board, he saw Elena. Her photo was pinned beside Marco's. Lines connected her to the hospital, to her apartment, to her mother's old care facility. But there were other lines, too, ones that led to the Bratva, to offshore accounts, to a file labeled contingency. Luca pulled the file. Inside were documents. Elena's medical school transcripts, her student loan statements, her mother's diagnosis, financial projections showing how long she could sustain the debt before collapsing. And underneath all of it, a single handwritten note in Vincent's precise script: leverage is control. Gratitude is a weapon. She'll be useful when the time comes. Luca stood in that hidden room for a long time. He understood what he was looking at. Elena hadn't been saved out of gratitude. She'd been selected. Vincent had known exactly how desperate she was, how much she needed help, and he'd used Marco's shooting as an excuse to bind her to him. The protection, the facility for her mother, the gilded cage of the estate, all of it was calculated to make Elena dependent, compliant, owned. And Luca had been the one to deliver her. He heard footsteps on the stairs. Luca closed the file, returned it to the cabinet, and slipped out of the room. The wall clicked shut behind him just as Elena rounded the corner. She was wearing an oversized sweater and pajama pants, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked softer than he'd ever seen her. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Just checking the perimeter. At 1 a.m? Threats don't keep business hours." Luca forced his voice to stay level. He couldn't let her see what he'd found, not yet. Not until he figured out what to do with the information. "What about you? Nightmares?" Elena leaned against the wall. She looked exhausted. "I keep dreaming about the parking garage, the guns, that sound they made when you..." She stopped. "I'd never heard a gunshot before, not in real life. You're safe here." "Am I?" Elena's eyes found his, and there was something searching in her gaze. "Or am I just in a prettier kind of prison?" Luca didn't have an answer for that. At least, not one he could give her. So instead he said, "Go back to bed, Elena. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." She didn't move. "Vincent wants me to work at his private clinic. Did you know that? He's building a state-of-the-art surgical facility on the property, and he wants me to be the head surgeon. He says it's for his people, employees who need medical care, who can't go to regular hospitals. But we both know what that means. I'd be stitching up criminals, killers, people like me." Luca kept his voice soft. Elena looked away. "I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did, and you're right." Luca took a step closer. He knew he shouldn't, knew the smart thing was to maintain distance, but he'd stopped being smart somewhere around the second week of this assignment. "I've done things I can't undo, but I've also kept you alive, Elena. That has to count for something." "It does," she whispered. "It counts for everything, and that's what scares me." The space between them felt charged, electric. Luca could smell her shampoo, something floral and clean. He could see the pulse jumping in her throat. If he leaned forward, if he closed the distance, if he kissed her the way he'd been wanting to kiss her for weeks now, he stepped back. "Go to bed." This time, she went. Luca spent the rest of the night in the hidden room, memorizing every document, every connection on that corkboard. He photographed everything with his phone, uploaded it to an encrypted cloud drive, and then erased his tracks. By dawn, he had a plan. It was a terrible plan, one that would probably get him killed, but it was the only option he could see. He was going to help Elena escape. And then he was going to destroy Vincent Castellano. The interrogation scene happened 3 days later. Vincent called Luca into his main office, the public one, the one designed to intimidate. Luca went, expecting another briefing, another threat assessment. Instead, he found Vincent sitting behind his desk with a tablet in his hands and murder in his eyes. "Sit," Vincent said. Luca sat. He kept his face neutral, his posture relaxed, but his mind was racing. Had Vincent found out about the hidden room, the photographs, the plan? Vincent turned the tablet around. On the screen was security footage from the wine cellar, time-stamped from 3 nights ago. It showed Luca entering the hidden room, examining the files, photographing the corkboard. Every damning second of it. "Would you like to explain?" Vincent asked quietly. Luca considered lying. He was good at lying. 8 years of shadow work had made him an expert. But Vincent would see through it, and the lie would only make things worse. So instead, Luca told the truth. "You've been using her," Luca said. "Elena. The protection, the help with her mother, it was never about repaying a debt. You've been grooming her, setting her up to be your personal surgeon, someone who can patch up your people without asking questions. You found someone desperate enough to manipulate, and you used me to deliver her." Vincent's expression didn't change. "And this bothers you?" "Yes. Why, you've done worse for me." "Because she's not a criminal," Luca said, and his voice came out harder than he'd intended. "She's a doctor who was trying to save her mother. She doesn't deserve to be trapped in your world." "Trapped?" Vincent leaned back in his chair. "I've given her everything she needed. Financial security, safety, the best care money can buy for her mother. What has she lost, exactly?" "Her choice, her freedom." "Freedom is an illusion," Vincent said. "We're all trapped by something: debt, loyalty, fear. I simply made Elena's cage more comfortable than most." He set the tablet down. "But you've developed feelings for her. That's the real issue here, isn't it? You think you're going to save her, play the hero, ride off into the sunset together. It's almost romantic. Almost." Lucas said nothing. There was nothing to say. Vincent stood. He crossed to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Let me tell you a story, Luca. When I was younger, much younger, I fell in love with a woman. Beautiful, intelligent, everything I thought I wanted. I gave her everything. Jewelry, cars, a house in the Hamptons. I thought I was building a life with her. And then I discovered she was an FBI informant. She'd been wearing a wire for 6 months, gathering evidence for a RICO case that would have put me away for life." "What did you do?" Luca asked, though he already knew the answer. "What I had to do." Vincent's voice was flat, emotionless. "I chose duty over heart. I chose survival over love, and I've never regretted it because I'm still here. She's not." The threat was implicit and absolute. Luca felt it settle over him like a shroud. "So here's what's going to happen," Vincent continued. "You're going to delete whatever files you copied. You're going to forget about the hidden room. And you're going to continue doing your job, protecting Elena, keeping her clothes, making sure she stays exactly where I need her to be. If you do this, everyone stays safe. Elena, her mother, even you. And if I don't," Vincent turned from the window. His smile was cold. "Then I'll make you watch while I take away everything you care about. Starting with her." Luca left the office with his hands steady and his mind screaming. He'd been backed into a corner, and there was no good way out. If he stayed, Elena remained trapped. If he helped her escape, Vincent would hunt them both. And if he did nothing, he'd become exactly what Elena feared: another killer in a suit, just following orders. He found Elena in the library. She was reading, or pretending to read, a medical textbook, but her eyes weren't tracking the words. She looked up when he entered. "Are you okay?" she asked immediately. We need to leave," Luca said. "Tonight, pack only what you can carry." Elena's book slipped from her hands. "What happened?" "Vincent knows I've been digging into his plans for you. He's given me an ultimatum. Fall in line or watch you suffer. I'm not doing either, so we're leaving." "Leaving where? He'll find us. You said it yourself, he has people everywhere." "We're going to the FBI." Luca pulled out his phone, showed her the photographs from the hidden room. "I have evidence. Financial records, witness lists, photos linking him to 5 different criminal enterprises. It's enough to open an investigation, maybe enough to take him down. But we have to move now, before he realizes what we're planning." Elena stood slowly. Her face had gone pale, but her voice was steady. "If we do this, my mother, I've already arranged for her transfer to a federal facility. She'll be under protection, same as us. It's not perfect, Elena, but it's the only way out. For both of us," she said. "Not just me, you're risking everything." "I know." "Why?" Luca looked at her. This woman he'd been assigned to protect, this woman who'd somehow become the most important person in his world, and said the only truth that mattered. "Because I can't watch him destroy you. Because somewhere between the parking garage and now, you stopped being an assignment. Because He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Elena crossed the space between them and kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like fear and hope in equal measure. Luca's hands found her waist, pulled her closer, and for 10 seconds he let himself forget about duty and danger and the fact that they were both probably going to die before morning. Elena pulled back first. Her eyes were bright. "We should go." They almost made it. The ambush happened at the gate. Luca had planned their exit carefully. 3 a.m., security shift change, window of exactly 4 minutes when the cameras would be rebooting. He'd disabled the GPS on his car, packed emergency supplies, mapped out a route to the FBI field office in Newark. Everything was in place. But Vincent had been planning too. The gate didn't open. Luca tried the override code. Nothing. He threw the car into reverse, but headlights flared behind them, cutting off retreat. 4 vehicles, at least a dozen men. They moved with military precision, surrounding the car, weapons drawn. "Get down," Luca told Elena. He reached for his Glock, but a voice over a loudspeaker stopped him. "Step out of the vehicle. Hands where we can see them. Do it now." Luca looked at Elena. She was crouched in the passenger seat, her face pressed against her knees, and he could see her shaking. He'd promised to keep her safe. He'd failed. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be." Elena lifted her head. Her eyes were fierce. "We tried, that matters." They got out of the car. Vincent's men surrounded them immediately, hands cuffed behind their backs, guns to their heads, the choreography of capture. Luca didn't resist. Resistance would get Elena killed. So he went quietly, and he watched as they pulled Elena in the opposite direction, toward a different vehicle. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She looked back at him once, and the expression on her face broke something in his chest. They separated them. Luca was taken to a warehouse on the waterfront, the kind of place where Vincent did wet work, where bodies disappeared into the river and questions were never asked. They chained him to a metal chair in a room that smelled like rust and old blood. And then they left him there, alone, for 6 hours. When Vincent finally arrived, dawn was breaking through the warehouse's grimy windows. "You disappointed me," Vincent said conversationally. He pulled up a crate and sat down, close enough that Luca could smell his expensive cologne. "I gave you a chance to do the right thing. I gave you an out, and you chose her instead." "Why?" Luca's throat was raw. "You wouldn't understand. Try me. Because she deserves better than this, better than you, better than me." Luca met Vincent's eyes. "You asked me once why I do this work. The truth is, I stopped knowing years ago. But when I was with her, protecting her, talking to her, just being near her, I remembered what it felt like to be worth something, to be more than just your weapon." Vincent considered this. Then he nodded slowly. "You're in love with her." "Yes. And you think that love makes you noble, that it justifies your betrayal?" "I think it makes me human," Luca said. "Something you stopped being a long time ago." The punch came fast, Vincent's fist connecting with Luca's jaw, snapping his head back. Blood filled his mouth. Vincent stood, shaking out his hand, and for the first time in 8 years, Luca saw genuine emotion on his boss's face. Rage. "You want to know what happens to people who betray me?" Vincent asked. "I'll show you." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. The video showed Elena in a white room, sitting on a metal chair identical to Luca's. She was unharmed but terrified. A man in a ski mask stood behind her, gun to her head. "Say the word," Vincent said, "and he pulls the trigger. Or you can cooperate. Tell me where you hid the evidence, give me the encryption keys, and I'll let her live. She goes back to the estate, continues her work at the clinic, and forgets this ever happened. Simple choice." Luca looked at the screen, at Elena's face, at the way her lips moved silently, forming words he couldn't hear. He thought about the hidden room, the photographs, the evidence that could take Vincent down. He thought about 8 years of loyalty, of debts and duty, and the promise he'd made to a man who'd saved his life. And then he thought about Elena bringing him terrible coffee, Elena learning to throw a punch, Elena kissing him in the library like she was choosing salvation over safety. "No," Luca said. Vincent's expression didn't change. "No, you're going to kill us both anyway. The moment I give you what you want, we're dead. At least this way, there's a chance the evidence gets found. A chance someone else takes you down." Luca smiled, and it hurt. "So no. You don't get to win this time." Vincent stared at him for a long moment. Then he put the phone away. "You're right. I was always going to kill you, but I wanted to give you the chance to save her. Prove you were capable of doing the smart thing. Clearly, I was mistaken." He turned to leave. Luca shouted after him. "She's going to be the one who destroys you, Elena. She's smarter than both of us, and when she gets the chance, she'll burn your whole empire down." Vincent paused at the door. He looked back. "She'll never get the chance." But he was wrong. The raid came 90 minutes later. FBI, ATF, NYPD, a joint task force descended on the warehouse like the wrath of God. Luca heard the helicopters first, then the shouting, then gunfire. Vincent's men tried to hold the perimeter, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Within 20 minutes it was over. An agent cut Luca's restraints. "Are you Luca Romano?" "Yes." "Where's Elena Moretti?" "I don't know." "Vincent separated us." The agent spoke into his radio. "Subject secured, still searching for the doctor." Then, to Luca, "We received an anonymous tip 3 hours ago. Someone sent us photos of a corkboard linking Vincent Castellano to 17 different criminal operations, plus GPS coordinates for this location and another warehouse in Red Hook. Any idea who that might have been?" Luca's mind raced. The only people who knew about that evidence were him, Vincent, and Elena, he said. "She must have copied my files. Sent them when Vincent took her." "Smart woman," the agent said. They found her in Red Hook. She was unconscious but alive, locked in a storage container with a guard who decided surrendering to federal agents was preferable to dying for Vincent Castellano. They brought her to Luca in an ambulance, and when she opened her eyes and saw him, she smiled. "Did it work?" she asked. "It worked." Luca took her hand. Her fingers were cold. "Vincent's in custody, so are 37 of his people. The whole organization is collapsing." "Good." Elena's eyes started to close. "My mother, safe, federal protection, she's asking about you. Then I guess we survived." Elena squeezed his hand. "Together." "Together," Luca agreed. The trial lasted 8 months. Vincent Castellano was convicted on 43 counts ranging from racketeering to murder, and he was sentenced to life without parole. Luca testified against him, every dirty secret, every hidden body, every betrayal. It felt like exorcism, like walking out of a burning building and into clean air. Elena never went back to the estate. She took a position at a teaching hospital in Boston, far from Brooklyn and the ghosts that lived there. Her mother transferred to a nearby facility, paid for by the federal government this time, not blood money. And Luca, after months of debriefings and depositions, was offered witness protection. He turned it down. "Why?" the prosecutor asked. "Because I'm done running," Luca said, "and because there's someone I need to find." He found her in Boston on a Tuesday afternoon in August. She was sitting on a bench outside the hospital, eating a salad from a plastic container and reading a medical journal. She looked up when his shadow fell across her page. "Hi," Luca said. Elena set down her fork. "Hi, I was in the neighborhood. Boston's 3 hours from New York. It's a big neighborhood." Luca sat down beside her. The silence stretched, comfortable and familiar. Finally, he said, "I'm done with Vincent's world. I'm done with shadow work and duty over heart. I testified against everyone who mattered, which means I've probably got a dozen contracts on my head. So I'm not exactly a safe bet. I saved a mob boss's son," Elena said, "which means there's probably a dozen contracts on my head too, so I guess we're even. I don't have a job or a place to live, or really any idea what comes next." "Sounds liberating." Luca looked at her. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that when you spend months in a gilded cage with someone, you learn who they are. And you're a good man, Luca Romano. You made a choice that almost got you killed because it was the right thing to do. That matters." Elena took his hand. "So yes, I'm saying whatever comes next, we figure it out together. If you want to." Luca thought about all the choices that had led him here. The debts, the loyalty, the moment in a parking garage when he'd first seen a doctor with shaking hands. He thought about duty and heart, and how maybe, just this once, they didn't have to be opposites. "I want to," he said. They sat together until Elena's lunch break ended, and then they walked into the hospital side by side. Behind them, the August sun blazed over Boston, and ahead, the future waited, uncertain and dangerous and absolutely worth fighting for. 3 years later, Luca stood in a church in Queens, waiting at the altar. He wore a suit that fit properly for the first time in his life, and his hands were steady. The doors opened. Elena walked toward him in a simple white dress, her mother wheeling beside her, both of them smiling like the world was exactly as it should be. When the priest asked if Luca would take Elena as his wife, he said yes without hesitation. And when Elena said yes in return, Luca finally understood what it meant to choose heart over duty, not because it was easy, but because love was the only duty that mattered. Outside, New York City carried on, indifferent and eternal. But inside that church, two people who'd survived the Mafia, the FBI, and their own worst instincts promised to survive everything else together. It wasn't a perfect ending. It wasn't even a completely happy one. But it was theirs, and that was enough.